When you're thinking about working with your students on strategies for subtracting from teen numbers, there are four that are particularly helpful and that are really focused on the mathematical properties of operations and tens. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time taking a look at those four, and also a way that you might have your students try and think through their ideas for coming up with these strategies. So let's start with 13 minus 9. If I were going to work with students, the very first day I would probably just ask, how can we figure this out without counting up or counting back? And one of the ways, if you gave them a little bit of time to think and perhaps either have 10 frames out or a Slavonic abacus or a couple of 10 stacks of cubes, the students might, even before they turn to the manipulatives, think about the part-part whole grids that you may have worked with them previously for goal 8 addition. And so at this point, somebody might point to your class chart and say, well, if I know that 4 plus 9 is 13, then I also know that 13 minus 9 is 4. And so they might make that quick relationship between subtraction and addition, and some students really find that helpful in that they don't really have to memorize the subtraction facts or even think about other strategies, because they're just always connecting addition with subtraction. A second strategy that students might really like is to use the manipulatives to try thinking about how they can subtract 9 away from 13 in a couple of different ways. So if we were going to use the Slavonic abacus, I'm going to go to the Learning Center's number rack applet so that you can see this on screen. And one way that students might think about this is, once they've set up their 13, is to say, you know what, I see that it would be really easy to take 9 away from the top row. And so then what I'm left with is 1 from the 10 and 3 more. So my answer is 4. And so they might start realizing that they could use a strategy called take from 10. Let me show it to you with another Math Learning Center applet. And this is what I think they call number frames. I set mine up with 2 vertical 10 frames and populated one by clicking on the 10, and it just quickly put 10 in the left-hand frame, and then I dragged 3 over to the other frame. So now that we've got these 13, a student might be able to use that very same thinking and say, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of 9 of these in this 10 frame. And when I do that, it's going to look the same as with the number rack, because now I'm going to have 1 that's left from the 10 and 3 more. So that will give me my 4. So it's again that take from 10 strategy. Now the other way that students might think about this is more abstractly, where they might say, okay, if I've got 13 minus 10, then, or 13 minus 9, then what I can do is I can break the 13 up into a 10 and 3, and then just take the 9 away from the 10. That leaves me with 1, and then I've got to add the other 3. So in the end, I wind up with 4. That's really just writing down abstractly what they might much more easily see with either the abacus or the 10 frames. Another strategy for working with 13 minus 10 or teen subtraction is to go back to our 10 frame. Let me repopulate this. So now that I have 13 and I want to take away 9 again, this time I might, as a student, think, well, you know what I want to do is I want to take 3 from this frame first and just clear it out. And then I've got to take the rest of the 9 away from the second rack. So let's see, 3 plus 6 is 9. So I've got to take 6 more away from the other rack, the other frame. So that was 5, 6. And so now I've got 4 left. So 13, taking away the 3 and then the 6, gets me to 4. If we were going to look at it with the abacus, we can go ahead and set up 13 again. And this time, as you can see, it'll be very similar to the 10 frames. We're going to take away the 3 and just clear that part of the number away. And then we've got to also take away the other 6 that make 9. So if we take those 6 away, then we're left with 4 on the left. So this strategy is a second strategy that we've learned from a number of other countries. They seem to teach very explicitly take from 10 strategy as well as this down over 10 strategy. So in this case, abstractly written, you can see that we've left the 13 alone, but then we've broken apart the subtrahend. We've left the minuend alone, and we've broken apart the subtrahend into 3 and 6, and we're taking away the 3 first to make our 10, and then we're subtracting the rest of the 9 to get our final answer of 4. So now we've got 3 strategies relating subtraction to addition, take from 10, and then down over 10. And finally, the last strategy is one that is often called subtraction compensation, although it certainly has other names as well. And it's probably more easily shown with a number line model. And I went ahead and already created this model using the Math Learning Center's number line applet. And so what you can see is that I started with 13 on a number line, and I jumped back 9. And then I don't really, if I don't know 13 minus 9, that's not that convenient. So I said, well, but I would be better off if I could just subtract 10. So if I'm going to subtract 10, that means I really need to adjust the 13 and make it one more, 14, because I'm going to be jumping one longer. So instead of 13 minus 9, I can think of this as 14 minus 10, which will give me 4. And when you write that abstractly, what you're really doing is you're adding 1 to the minuend and 1 to the subtrahend, which will then give you 14 minus 10 is 4. So the 4 ways that your students might develop over the course of a few days are relating subtraction to addition, take from 10, down over 10, and subtraction compensation. I wouldn't really want to ever test the students on all of these, but I would be interested in seeing which ones they favored. Are there 1 or 2 in your class that are much more favored than any of the others? So hope this helps.